Serial killer movie. That's all I had heard about The Little Things prior to actually sitting down to watch it. While you could distill the film down to those three words, there's significantly more going on here. While it has the hallmarks of your standard thriller, it's also an old-fashioned neo-noir mystery drenched in all sorts of atmosphere. It also happens to have a handful of laugh-out-loud moments, solid performances, a story that doesn't quite resonate, and an ending that threatens to undermine all of it. Thank you so much for checking out the review. Before we get started, click on the red subscribe button and the notification bell. That way you know whenever I post a new video. For today's review, I will be keeping it spoiler-free. Denzel Washington is one of the finest actors of my lifetime. He's won a pair of Oscars, in 1989 for Glory and in 2001 for Training Day. In addition to critical acclaim, he's also starred in fan favorites like Man on Fire and Remember the Titans. He has also directed a handful of films himself, like Antoine Fisher and Fences. While his output has slowed down quite a bit over the last decade or so, it's always great to see him back on the screen. 2021's The Little Things is a crime thriller set in Southern California during the 1990s. A serial killer is stalking Los Angeles and killing random women throughout the area. When Washington's character Joe Deacon leaves his deputy post in Bakersfield to deliver evidence to his old LA precinct, he decides to use up his vacation days while trying to help his old coworker solve the case. He immediately clashes with his old boss for unknown reasons, and gets off to a bad start with the homicide detective leading up the investigation. It appears that Joe burned himself out working a prior case, left town, and somehow managed to piss off most of his friends on the way out the door. Did Joe really just burn himself out, or is there more to the story? Director John Lee Hancock, who gave us the criminally underappreciated Netflix exclusive The Highwaymen, gets behind the camera and really ratchets up the dread and tension. Everything from the soundtrack to the cinematography just screams neo-noir. This aspect of the film is easily the best thing it has going for it, and in many ways it renders the actual serial killer hunting part of the story as mostly obsolete. Deacon takes center stage as the weary veteran law enforcement professional who desperately wants to bury his past. You can tell almost immediately that time has not been kind to him, and he's seen all manner of terrible things during his lengthy career. Washington plays the part well, and shows a surprising amount of emotional depth as the narrative pulls back the layers of mystery surrounding Joe. In many ways, The Little Things acts much more as a character study, combining flashbacks with haunting images to paint a picture of Joe that very few people in his life actually get to see. Washington is teamed up alongside Rami Malek, who plays big shot detective Jimmy Baxter. These two men have opposing demeanors, with Deacon's reserved nature contrasting Baxter's commanding presence. The personalities of both men make for surprising chemistry, and while each have their own reasons for wanting to solve the case, their relationship becomes the centerpiece of the story as soon as they cross paths. Malek is one of those actors that just demands your attention, and it's almost impossible to take your eyes off him. His mysterious delivery and speech patterns are perfectly suited for an emotionally complex film such as this. Rounding out the primary cast is Jared Leto as the mysterious Albert Sparma. Sparma may be the killer, he may not be the killer, but Leto commits to the role with everything he has. Alternating between completely nuts, certifiably creepy, and laugh-out-loud hilarious is an interesting choice for the character, but one that works well at keeping the audience on their toes. You have to give Leto some credit. There's far more meat on the bone than most roles like this, and Sparma is both an integral piece of the puzzle and another character that you cannot take your eyes off of. The entire story revolves completely around these three men, each of them far more complex than first impressions would indicate, and each of them is predetermined to meet at this point in time. All three men give very good performances and should be commended accordingly. Now, The Little Things works from an aesthetic and presentation standpoint, but the movie has some fairly substantial problems that drag it down. First, while I certainly appreciate Hancock embracing the film noir aspects of the story, it simply doesn't work as a serial killer film. There's not much here that we haven't seen before in other better films, and the paint-by-numbers approach to the mystery hurts the film. Second, this movie has a number of extremely noticeable plot holes, and the film's conclusion is a big, fat letdown. I have no problem with the vast majority of the ending, but the final scene undermines nearly everything that has come before. I like a good twist ending. It felt like they had that here, but then it's all undone by the final 30 seconds. In addition to just being silly, it also ignores everything we've been told about two of these characters and requires a suspension of disbelief so big you could drive a truck through it. Hancock, who also wrote this, finished the first draft of the script in 1993, which is 28 years ago. I have a hard time believing that at no point did anyone associated with this project raise their hand and say, this part of the movie doesn't really work. There's one last criticism that needs to be addressed. The Little Things is often a very slow burn, And I appreciate movies that take their time, but again, with the ending. At the end of a simmering movie like this, there's usually something, anything, that makes your eyes bulge out of your head with surprise or your heart drop into your stomach. This movie doesn't really do that. It maintains that steady level of tension throughout and then just ends. I'm not asking for big explosions or some huge action movie set piece, but your movie needs to make me feel something in the end. And perhaps that illustrates the biggest overall issue that I have with The Little Things. It comes so very close to getting it right. It has a great musical score by Thomas Newman. It's well acted, it looks fantastic, but it almost gets the characters right. It almost gets the story right, and it's almost as clever as it desperately wants you to believe it is. It's not a dumpster fire by any stretch of the imagination, but in a world where thrillers are a dime a dozen and neo-noir detective movies are far more rare, Hancock came so close to combining the two genres into something beautiful, but he just didn't quite make it all the way. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the review, please consider subscribing to the channel. You can also like and share the video since that helps the channel grow. Sound off down in the comments, let me know what you thought of The Little Things, and I'll see you next Wednesday at 9 a.m.